In this video, I'm going to explain how you use the template provided for your project. The file name is template product sprint backlog, and then it is the Excel spreadsheet. So the very first tab sheet of this spreadsheet is labeled as a proposed product backlog. As you remember, product backlog is a requirements of the project. In other words, that is a proposal of the term project. So when you give the requirements of the term project, you need to use the child user story format. So using the child user stories, you need to describe what kind of software you are going to develop. Remember that each user story must have three clauses: as a, I want, and so that. Also remember that so that part is the most important part of the user story because it gives the reason why you want to do something. So that reason will guide you how you should implement the user story. So all the user stories collectively should describe everything about your project. So the number of user stories should be not just a trivial. It should be huge if your program is a decent size or complex ones. So for purpose of organization, the first column is a category. This is based on the object-oriented software construct and design class, or the game is assumed that then a category of a gamer, bomb enemy, UFO, and missile is there. Then one of the user story is as a gamer, I want to press the start button so that I can begin playing the game. So as a term project proposal, you need to create a proposed product backlog, which completely describe the entire software you are going to develop. Depending on the course, you may be allowed or required to do as a team project. In that case, you need to specify which member is going to take care of the user story or responsible for user story. Also remember that user story is simple and small enough so that it could be done within one sprint, also by one member. So here in assigned to part, you should specify only one member. So multiple member names should not appear. If multiple member names appear, that is not good user story. User story assumes that only one member can do that. So that's the proposed backlog. Now, as a project begins, at the very first sprint, what you need to do is just choose a few of the user stories that should be implemented first. So that's a high prioritized user stories. Just some of those pick up and then copy those user story into sprint 1 sheet. So sprint 1, you just choose some of those and copy that. So if I move to sprint 1, so I picked up those two user stories. So this user story is called epic because it may be some big and complex one. So anyway, those two are picked up and I copy that, and then split the epic into multiple child user stories. This part is also very important because as you begin implementing the user story, many cases you find that this user story is too big or too complex. Then if you break it into smaller pieces, it's a lot easier to handle it. So it's a general divide and conquer approach. So come up with multiple child user stories out of the epic you have picked up from the product backlog. And then for each child user story, give a unique ID for that. So for the second user story from the proposed backlog, in this example, I split into 3 child user stories. Also, each child user story, a member should be uniquely assigned to do so. At the end of the sprint, as a testing is complete, you can just mark the status of completed or in progress if it's not completed, and say some notes about that, like forward to sprint 2. Also, you can give a detail what was the problem and the like. So in the bottom of the table, also remember that child user story is also user story, so it must have all of three clauses: as a, I want to, so that. Yeah. Then you are allowed to introduce a new epic that is not in the proposed backlog. So in that case, in the notes column, just mark it as a new epic. However, do not edit the original product backlog. This is only for your own benefits. So at the conclusion of the project, just compare what you have given in original product backlog and then what you have added since then. So through those comparisons and then considerations, you may learn some new lessons, what you have done not properly at the project proposal. So in the next project, you may do a better job. Just for your own benefits, just keep it this way. As you create the child user stories and then assign new ID, what you need to do more is as follows. So for each child user story, you need to add acceptance criteria. So in this example, I have added another spreadsheet for that labeled the sprint one acceptance. So in this acceptance criteria sheet for each child user story ID, which was assigned in the previous sheet here, and then come up with how you may test it. So testing criteria is also very important because with that information you have more detailed information about the user story, how it should be implemented. So developing acceptance criteria for each child user story is very important, and this should be done at the very beginning of the sprint as a child user story is created. So here at the bottom of the table, another note is that more than one acceptance criteria per child user story is strictly required. The reason is that if you have a child user story and then if you cannot give more than one acceptance criteria, then it implies that the child user story is too small. You may need to redesign the child user story so that you can have at least two, or the more the better, multiple acceptance criteria could be given. Another one is that acceptance criterion must not be a mere repetition of the child user story. So it should have more info, more information that is not present in child user story. For example, in child user story 1, so if I go back, child user story 1 is as a gamer, I want to move the shooter using 4 arrow keys so that shooter can navigate the game scene. But if you give acceptance criteria such that as I press the key it moves, then I don't have any more information what is already there in child user story. So such acceptance criteria is a bad one. So acceptance criteria should have more information than is in user story. So acceptance criteria, for example, is that shooter moves to the right by 10 pixels up with a right arrow key and the like. Also, you should give how you test 10 pixels. So one of the ideas is as left key is pressed 20 times, then 20 times 10 pixels is about 200 pixels. The shooter crosses from right edge to the left edge of the screen, assuming the game screen size is 200 pixels and so on. So you need to give more information that is not present in user story so that this could be used for correctness implementation of user stories. Also here, the assigned to is who wrote the code for that. The same information was in the previous sheet, but now here you are going to specify who tested this child user story, and test results are recorded here. Then you may give some comments if test fails there. So that's what you need to do for each sprint. So for each sprint, you create child user story, and then you develop acceptance criteria. So at the end of the sprint, using the acceptance criteria, you test the correctness of the implementation. And then some of those failed ones, you can move forward to the next sprint. And then you repeat this process for number of sprints allowed in your project. And sprint 2, do the similar things now again from the proposed product backlog, pick up some other user stories not implemented in sprint 1 yet. So copy those ones from product backlog and put in sprint 2, so you can use the same format provided in sprint 1, and for each child user story you have in sprint 2, you need to develop acceptance criteria for that. Just repeat and then add more sheets, sprint 3 and sprint 4 and the like, as long as the term project is allowed. And when project is done, now in the last sheet, is finalize the product backlog, just rearrange all of the child user stories you have complete in sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, and so on. All of the child user stories you have completed, and then copy that one into this column. So completed the child user stories only based on the submitted program at the end of the project period. So if you have a closely related child user stories, then you may merge it into a bigger user story. It's allowed. So instead of having too long list, too many child user stories, just try to combine some smaller ones into bigger one, so that you have a reasonable number of child user stories specified here. So this is what you need to do at the conclusion of the term project.